Welcome back to another episode of True Crime Untold Cases. I'm your host, Harper Quinn. In the summer of 1980, two young women set out for a peaceful counterculture gathering in West Virginia's Monongahela National Forest. Instead, they became victims of one of the state's most haunting murder cases. What began as a baffling local investigation would eventually expose the work of a notorious serial killer, reveal a wrongful conviction, and forever change a quiet mountain community. This is the story of the Rainbow Murders. In the summer of 1980, the small town of Pocahontas County, West Virginia, was forever changed by a series of brutal murders that would come to be known as the Rainbow Murders. The events that unfolded along the serene Droop Mountain would shake the local community to its core and remain one of the most disturbing criminal cases in West Virginia's history. On June 25, 1980, two young women, Vicki Durian, age 26, and Nancy Santomero, age 19, were hitchhiking their way to the Rainbow Family Gathering, a counterculture peace festival that was being held in the Monongahela National Forest. The women had traveled from Iowa and Connecticut respectively, drawn by the promise of peace, love, and community that the Rainbow family represented. Neither of them would make it to their destination. The last confirmed sighting of Vicki and Nancy was at a grocery store in Droop, West Virginia, where they'd stopped to buy some supplies. Local residents later recalled seeing the two women walking along U.S. Route 219, their backpacks and colorful clothing marking them as obvious outsiders in this rural community. Hours later, their bodies were discovered in a remote clearing known locally as Briary Knob. Both women had been shot multiple times with a .22 caliber rifle. They were found fully clothed, lying face up approximately 10 feet apart from each other. The crime scene showed no signs of sexual assault, and their belongings appeared undisturbed. This peculiar detail would later become significant in the investigation, as it suggested the motive wasn't robbery or sexual violence, but something else entirely. The murders sent shockwaves through both the local community and the Rainbow Family Gathering. Local law enforcement, led by Sheriff Walt Helmick, found themselves dealing with a case unlike anything they'd encountered before. The investigation was immediately complicated by several factors. The victims were out-of-state travelers with no local connections, the crime scene was remote, and the transient nature of the Rainbow Family Gathering meant potential witnesses were constantly moving through the area. The initial investigation focused on the local population, particularly those who might have had access to Briary Knob. The area was well known to locals but difficult to find for outsiders, suggesting the killer or killers were familiar with the territory. Investigators conducted hundreds of interviews, but solid leads were hard to come by. The rural nature of Pocahontas County, with its tight-knit community and culture of silence, proved to be both a help and a hindrance to law enforcement. One of the early suspects was Jacob Beard, a local farmer and construction worker. Several witnesses had reported seeing his red pickup truck in the area around the time of the murders. However, Beard had an alibi that initially appeared to check out, and the investigation would continue to pursue other leads for years to come. The case took an interesting turn when investigators learned of local rumors about a group called the Cowboy Mafia. This loose association of local men was known for their antagonistic attitude toward outsiders, particularly the hippies and counterculture types who would come to the area for the rainbow gatherings. Some residents suggested that the murders might have been a message to discourage such gatherings in their community. As months turned into years, the case grew cold. The murders had a lasting impact on the community, creating a climate of fear and suspicion. The Rainbow family continued to hold their gatherings, but attendance dropped significantly in the years following the murders. Local residents became more wary of outsiders, and the area's reputation as a peaceful mountain community was tarnished by the shadow of unsolved murders. The investigation would take many twists and turns over the following decades. Multiple theories emerged. Was it the work of a single killer or multiple perpetrators? Was it a crime of opportunity or a planned attack? Were the women targeted specifically because of their connection to the Rainbow family, or were they simply in the wrong place at the wrong time? In 1993, 13 years after the murders, the case saw its first major breakthrough. A prison inmate in Florida came forward with information about the murders, claiming that Jacob Beard, the same man who had been questioned in the initial investigation, had confessed to the crimes while they were incarcerated together. This new testimony led to Beard's arrest and subsequent trial in 1999. The trial was highly controversial. The prosecution's case relied heavily on circumstantial evidence and jailhouse informant testimony, which many considered unreliable. Nevertheless, Beard was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment. However, this would not be the end of the story, as serious questions about the verdict would soon emerge. Local law enforcement had also been pursuing another lead, a man named Joseph Paul Franklin, a white supremacist serial killer who was already on death row for other murders. Franklin had been known to target interracial couples and Jews, but he had also expressed hatred for hippies and counterculture groups like the Rainbow family. In 2000, Franklin made a shocking confession from his prison cell. He claimed responsibility for the Rainbow murders, providing details about the crime that hadn't been made public. He described the weapon used, the location, and specific details about the victims that seemed to corroborate his confession. Franklin's admission would lead to a complete re-examination of the case. The investigation began to reveal troubling inconsistencies in the case against Jacob Beard. Witnesses who had testified against him recanted their statements, claiming they had been pressured by law enforcement. The jailhouse informant's credibility was severely questioned, and new evidence seemed to support Franklin's confession rather than Beard's guilt. In 2000, after serving nearly 2 years in prison, Jacob Beard was granted a new trial. This time, armed with Franklin's confession and the recanted testimony, Beard's defense team was able to present a much stronger case for his innocence. The jury found him not guilty, and he was released from prison. The story of the Rainbow murders serves as a stark reminder of the complexities and challenges in criminal investigations, particularly in rural areas where resources may be limited and community dynamics can complicate matters. It also highlights the dangers of tunnel vision in investigations and the importance of continuing to pursue all leads, even after an initial conviction has been secured. The case would continue to evolve, with Joseph Paul Franklin's confession adding a new dimension to the understanding of these tragic events. His involvement would raise questions about the intersection of hate crimes, counterculture movements, and rural American life in the 1980s. Franklin's confession to the Rainbow murders came during a series of interviews while he was already on death row for other crimes. His detailed account included information about the .22 caliber rifle he had used, which matched the ballistics evidence from the crime scene. He described how he had been driving through West Virginia when he spotted Vicki Durian and Nancy Santomero walking along Route 219. According to Franklin, his deep-seated hatred for what he called race mixers and hippies had driven him to commit the murders. He explained that he had seen the women's backpacks and clothing and immediately identified them as part of the Rainbow family movement, which he despised for its acceptance of racial integration and alternative lifestyles. Franklin described following the women to Briary Knob, where he carried out the killings with calculated precision. The level of detail in Franklin's confession was compelling. He accurately described the positions of the bodies, the number of shots fired, and even specific items of clothing the victims had been wearing. These details had never been released to the public, lending significant credibility to his confession. Furthermore, investigators were able to confirm that Franklin had indeed been in the area at the time of the murders, as he was known to travel extensively throughout the country during his killing spree. Joseph Paul Franklin's broader criminal history helped contextualize the Rainbow murders within a larger pattern of hate-motivated violence. Between 1977 and 1980, Franklin had committed a series of murders across the United States, targeting African Americans, Jews, and interracial couples. He was known to stake out locations for days, using a sniper rifle to attack his victims from a distance. The method used in the Rainbow murders aligned with his established pattern of operation. The case took another significant turn when investigators discovered Franklin's connection to other high-profile attacks. He had attempted to assassinate Vernon Jordan Jr., the civil rights leader and former president of the National Urban League in Fort Wayne, Indiana. He had also shot and paralyzed Larry Flynt, the publisher of Hustler magazine, in Georgia in 1978, allegedly because Flynt's magazine featured interracial couples. For the residents of Pocahontas County, Franklin's confession brought a mixture of relief and renewed trauma. The knowledge that the murders had been committed by an outsider rather than a member of their community helped heal some of the divisions that had formed during the investigation. However, the random nature of the killings, the fact that Vicki and Nancy had been targeted simply because of their appearance and association with the Rainbow family, highlighted the senseless nature of the tragedy. Jacob Beard's exoneration led to a civil lawsuit against the state of West Virginia. In 2003, he was awarded $2 million in compensation for his wrongful conviction. The case highlighted serious flaws in the initial investigation and prosecution, including the reliance on questionable witness testimony and the failure to thoroughly investigate other potential suspects, including Franklin. The Rainbow family continued to hold their gatherings in various locations across the United States, but the murders left an indelible mark on their history. The organization implemented stricter safety protocols and began warning members about the potential dangers of hitchhiking. The murders also led to increased cooperation between the Rainbow family and local law enforcement during subsequent gatherings. Joseph Paul Franklin's death row interviews provided further insight into his motivations and the extent of his crimes. He spoke with a chilling detachment about the Rainbow murders and his other killings, expressing no remorse for his actions. He viewed his murders as part of a racial holy war, and his targets included anyone he perceived as promoting or accepting racial integration. In November 2013, Franklin was executed by lethal injection at the Missouri State Penitentiary. Before his death, he had confessed to 8 murders, though investigators believed he was responsible for as many as 20 killings across the country. The Rainbow murders were among the last of his confirmed victims before his arrest in 1980. The case continues to resonate with law enforcement professionals and true crime researchers as an example of the complexities involved in rural criminal investigations. The initial focus on local suspects, while understandable given the remote location of the crimes, had led investigators away from considering the possibility of a transient killer like Franklin. The story of the Rainbow murders also serves as a powerful reminder of the impact of hate crimes on communities. The deaths of Vicki Durian and Nancy Santomero were not just an attack on 2 individuals, but on the ideals of peace, acceptance, and community that the Rainbow family represented. Their murders highlighted the dangerous undercurrent of extremist ideology that existed and continues to exist in American society. The Briery Knob site where the murders occurred has become a somber landmark in Pocahontas County. While some locals prefer not to discuss the tragedy, others feel it's important to remember Vicki and Nancy's stories as a way to honor their memories and warn future generations about the devastating consequences of hate-motivated violence. The legacy of the Rainbow murders continues to influence law enforcement practices in rural communities across America. The case highlighted the importance of considering both local and transient suspects in rural crimes, particularly given the increasing mobility of violent offenders in the late 20th century. The investigation's initial missteps became a teaching tool for police academies, demonstrating how preconceptions about rural crime can sometimes blind investigators to other possibilities. The aftermath of Franklin's confession led to a thorough review of unsolved murders along his known travel routes during the late 1970s. Investigators from multiple states began comparing notes on cold cases that matched his methodology. This collaborative effort revealed patterns that might have been noticed earlier if there had been better communication between jurisdictions at the time of the original crimes. One of the most poignant aspects of the case emerged through interviews with the victims' families in the years following Franklin's confession. Nancy Santomero's sister, Maria, spoke publicly about how the uncertainty surrounding her sister's death had haunted their family for decades. Not knowing who did it or why was almost as painful as losing Nancy, she said in a 2001 interview. Franklin's confession finally gave us answers, but it also showed us how random and senseless this violence was. Vicki Durian's family faced similar struggles. Her brother, Tom Durian, became an advocate for improved communication between law enforcement agencies after learning how Franklin had managed to evade capture for so long while moving between states. If police departments had better ways to share information back then, maybe my sister would still be alive, he stated during a 2002 law enforcement conference. The case also led to significant changes in how the Rainbow family organized their gatherings. The group established a more formal system of communication with local law enforcement before events, created designated safe zones, and implemented a buddy system for travelers. Longtime Rainbow family member Michael Healing Heart Johnson explained in a 2005 interview, "We lost some of our innocence after Vicki and Nancy were killed. We still believe in peace and love, but we're more aware now that not everyone shares those values." The wrongful conviction of Jacob Beard led to reforms in West Virginia's criminal justice system. The state revised its policies regarding jailhouse informant testimony and implemented stricter standards for evidence presentation to grand juries. Beard's case became required reading for law students studying wrongful convictions, with particular emphasis on the dangers of confirmation bias in criminal investigations. Local historian Martha Shields conducted extensive interviews with Pocahontas County residents for her 2010 book, Shadow on the Mountain, The Rainbow Murders and Their Legacy. She documented how the case changed the community's relationship with outsiders. Before the murders, most locals viewed hippies with mild annoyance at worst, she wrote. After the murders, there was fear on both sides. Locals feared dangerous outsiders, while visitors feared local hostility. It took years for those wounds to heal. The investigation's impact on local law enforcement was equally profound. Former Sheriff Walt Helmick, who later served in the West Virginia Senate, spoke about the case's influence on his career. "We learned that evil doesn't always come from where you expect it. Sometimes the obvious suspect isn't the right one, and sometimes the truth is stranger than anything you could imagine." The site of the murders, Briary Knob, has taken on an almost mythical status in local law. While some residents avoid the area, others have turned it into an unofficial memorial site. Small tokens, flowers, peace symbols, and rainbow-colored ribbons occasionally appear there, left by those who remember Vicki and Nancy's story. The Rainbow Murders also sparked academic interest in the intersection of counterculture movements and rural communities. Sociologist Dr. Rebecca Martinez's 2015 study, Strangers in the Hills, used the case as a starting point to examine how cultural conflicts can escalate into violence. Her research revealed patterns of misunderstanding and fear that continue to affect relationships between established rural communities and alternative lifestyle groups. Joseph Paul Franklin's final interviews before his execution provided chilling insights into the mindset of ideologically motivated killers. He spoke of the Rainbow Murders as if they were simply another mission in his self-declared war against those he viewed as enemies. His lack of remorse and matter-of-fact descriptions of the killings underscored the dangerous nature of extremist beliefs when combined with a capacity for violence. The case remains a powerful reminder of how hate crimes affect not just their immediate victims, but entire communities and movements. The deaths of Vicki Durian and Nancy Santomero represented more than just the loss of 2 young lives. They marked a collision between the idealistic spirit of the 1960s counterculture and the violent reality of American extremism. Today, the Rainbow Murders serve as both a historical marker and a warning. They remind us that peaceful ideals must be protected, that justice systems can fail even with the best intentions, and that the darkness of hate-motivated violence can touch even the most serene corners of America. The story continues to resonate because its themes, justice, prejudice, community, and redemption, remain relevant in contemporary discussions about American society and its ongoing struggles with extremism and violence. The impact of the Rainbow Murders extended far beyond the immediate aftermath of Franklin's confession and execution. Law enforcement agencies across the country began examining their own cold cases through a new lens, particularly those involving seemingly random attacks on counterculture groups or alternative communities. The investigation also led to a deeper examination of Franklin's other potential victims. Detective James Randall, who worked on the case from 1993 to 2013, discovered several unsolved murders along Interstate 81 that bore striking similarities to Franklin's methodology. The Rainbow Murders helped us establish a more complete profile of Franklin's movements and patterns, Randall explained in a 2014 interview. This information proved invaluable in connecting dots that had remained separate for decades. The case sparked renewed interest in the phenomenon of transient serial killers who exploited America's highway systems. The FBI's Highway Serial Killings Initiative, launched in 2004, drew several lessons from the Rainbow Murders investigation. Special Agent Sharon Brooks noted, Franklin's ability to commit murders across state lines without detection for so long highlighted critical gaps in our interstate communication systems. The Rainbow Murders became a catalyst for improving these systems. In 2015, a comprehensive review of evidence from the original investigation revealed previously overlooked details. Forensic technician Margaret Wheeler discovered additional shell casings at Briary Knob that matched Franklin's preferred ammunition. Even decades later, the physical evidence continued to corroborate Franklin's confession, Wheeler reported. The ballistics matched not only the murder weapon, but also shells found at other crime scenes linked to Franklin. The Rainbow family's response to the tragedy evolved over time. In 2016, they established the Durian Santomero Memorial Fund, which provides safety education and resources for young people attending counterculture gatherings. The fund also supports research into preventing hate-motivated violence at public events. Local resident Thomas McKnight, who had initially discovered the victims' bodies, spoke publicly for the first time in 2017. Those girls could have been anybody's daughters, he said. I think about them every time I pass Briary Knob. Their deaths taught us that evil can appear anywhere, even in our peaceful mountain community. The case continued to influence police training methods. The West Virginia State Police Academy developed a specialized curriculum using the Rainbow Murders as a case study in rural criminal investigation. The program emphasizes the importance of considering both local and non-local suspects, properly handling physical evidence, and maintaining objective perspectives throughout investigations. In 2018, previously sealed documents from Franklin's prison interviews were released, providing new insights into his selection of Briary Knob as the murder site. Franklin had described choosing the location specifically because it was isolated yet accessible, demonstrating a calculated approach that contradicted earlier theories about the murders being purely opportunistic. The tragedy's lasting effect on Pocahontas County became evident in a 2019 community impact study. Researcher Dr. Linda Whitaker found that the murders had fundamentally altered local attitudes toward tourism and outsiders. The community developed a complex relationship with its own hospitality, she wrote. While maintaining their welcoming nature, residents became more aware of security concerns and the need for balanced approaches to tourism. The Rainbow murders also influenced modern approaches to cold case investigations. Detective Sarah Morrison, who specializes in reviewing unsolved crimes, explained, "This case taught us to never stop looking for new angles. The initial investigation focused too narrowly on local suspects, but the truth was literally passing through on the highway." The story of Vicki Durian and Nancy Santomero continues to resonate with new generations. In 2020, local high school students created a documentary about the impact of the murders on their community. The project, titled Rainbow's Shadow, won several awards and helped younger residents understand this crucial chapter in their town's history. Recent years have seen increased academic interest in studying the broader sociological implications of the case. Dr. James Henderson's 2021 analysis examined how the murders reflected larger cultural conflicts of the 1980s. The clash between the Rainbow family's idealistic worldview and Franklin's extremist ideology represented a microcosm of America's broader cultural divisions. The case has also influenced modern approaches to protecting vulnerable populations at large gatherings. Security consultant Rebecca Torres noted, "The Rainbow murders taught us valuable lessons about risk assessment and protection strategies for outdoor festivals and gatherings. Many of today's standard safety protocols can be traced back to changes implemented after this tragedy." As the story of the Rainbow murders passes into history, its lessons remain relevant. The case continues to demonstrate how single acts of violence can reshape communities, how justice systems can fail and be reformed, and how the shadow of extremism can darken even the most peaceful places. The murders of Vicki Durian and Nancy Santomero stand as a testament to the importance of remaining vigilant against hate-motivated violence, while preserving the spirit of community and acceptance they cherished. The legacy of the Rainbow murders continues to evolve in contemporary discussions about hate crimes and domestic terrorism. In recent years, scholars and law enforcement experts have drawn parallels between Joseph Paul Franklin's ideologically motivated violence and modern manifestations of extremism. A 2022 analysis by the Southern Poverty Law Center used the Rainbow murders as a historical reference point in tracking the evolution of hate-based violence in America. Researcher Dr. Marcus Thompson observed, "Franklin's targeting of the Rainbow family members represents an early example of what we now recognize as domestic terrorism motivated by extremist ideology. The patterns we see in his case continue to manifest in contemporary hate crimes. The site of the murders has become the focus of preservation efforts. In 2023, local historian Patricia Meadows led an initiative to create a permanent memorial at Briary Knob. We need to preserve this history," she explained, "not just to honor Vicki and Nancy, but to ensure future generations understand the real-world consequences of hate and intolerance." The case has also influenced modern forensic practices. Cold case investigators now regularly use the Rainbow murders as an example of how physical evidence, when properly preserved, can corroborate confessions made decades after the fact. The shell casings recovered from Briary Knob have been digitally archived as part of a national database for ballistics comparison. the families of both victims have continued their advocacy work. Nancy Santomero's niece, Jennifer, established a scholarship fund for students studying criminal justice, with a focus on preventing hate crimes. "My aunt's death shouldn't just be a tragedy," she said in a recent interview. "It should be a catalyst for positive change." The Rainbow Family's annual gatherings now include a moment of silence for Vicki and Nancy, incorporating their memory into the movement's oral history. Longtime member David Sunshine Peterson reflected, "Their spirits live on in our commitment to peace and acceptance. Every year we remember them and renew our dedication to the values they died believing in." The case remains a powerful reminder of the importance of maintaining open minds in criminal investigations, the danger of allowing prejudice to cloud judgment, and the devastating impact that hate-based violence can have on communities. As new generations learn about the Rainbow murders, the story continues to serve as both a warning and a call to action in the ongoing struggle against extremism and hate.